What comes to your mind whenever you think about the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans? Because where I live in, there is this dichotomy of these two entities being completely antithetical to each other, being absolutely opposites. And it makes me very, very mad. um, like, people who think this usually put Greeks to a higher level. And we say, yeah, the Greeks were great philosophers, thinkers, scientists. They broke the matrix. They bridged the multiverse. They were there, sitting beside Cthulhu and eating cocorizo all day long. Meanwhile, the Romans, ugly warmongers, imperialist monarchists, fascists, communists. I don't know. Insert every possible insult to your political enemies and apply it to the Romans. Yeah, that's pretty much how most people view the things here. And I'm not sure why, but mainly there are two categories: the people who studied and the people who did not study these things. The people who studied are those people who study the Romans and the Greeks collaterally, in a certain sense. Like, they study philosophy and they study, literature. With all due respect, literature and philosophy are beautiful subjects which I am also passionate about. And all of my respects to people who have a high degree of knowledge in all of those things. However, you should not, base an entire society and culture upon the lectures that have been given to you regarding specifically literature, okay, or philosophy. Because that takes specific people who have specific ideas out of their culture. Yes, they can resemble their culture and society, and they will likely do. At the same time, it is not necessary, okay? And that aside, the problem is also that you are trying to complete in your mind a gap that has been given by your lectures, because of course your lectures will not focus on necessarily on the actions of the Romans and the Greeks. We will not focus too much on the history, what happens. We will give it as a background, but you don't have the tools if you only study literature and philosophy to understand that, and you just finish the gaps with what you think is more correct. And of course, you don't have any other tool other than the text that you're reading and you're studying. So, of course, looking at the literary corpus of the Greeks, one might, of course, assume they were more sophisticated. But again, it's not really how you should do it. But we'll get to it little by little. The second group of people are people who know pretty much nothing or just surface level knowledge of history. So the people who inform themselves on historical, if you can call them like that, historically themed um, documentaries, magazines, memes. Goddamn. People, please do not use memes as your source. Like, it's like people citing Dovahati's unbiased history of Rome. With all due respect to Dovahati, it's a beautiful series. It's fun, great entertainment. But as he himself said, and please follow the will of the author in this case, do not use it as a damn historical source. Please. Anyway, so yeah, this is the second group of people. They generalize, and generalizing, you might come to this conclusion with the Greeks being more sophisticated, intelligent, blah blah blah, than the Romans. Well, both of these people sometimes use these three argumentations that I'm gonna cite now. The Greeks were philosophers, the Romans were warriors. The things are not compatible. The Greeks were democratics, the Romans were not, and the Greeks had something cool, and then the Romans stole it, meaning that the Greeks must be, more sophisticated if the Romans had to copy and steal Greek stuff. Okay, let's demolish every single thing that I just said. So, the first Greeks philosophers, Romans warriors. I am not sure how in the world can we say that the Greeks were only philosophers when one of the greatest pieces of greatest wait g- widespread, not greatest, widespread. I meant greatest in that sense. Pieces of media about ancient Greek histories. The movie 300. Okay, I am not saying that 300 is a good representation. It is not. It is not. But it is widespread. Come on, if people that have surface level knowledge would take the information from there, you would assume, okay, the Greeks maybe were not only philosophers. And then you have the educated person coming to you and say, those were the Spartans, my friend. The Spartans are like the Romans of the Greeks. What do you mean? You see, I'm smart. I have surface level knowledge as well. It's take my point, my friend. No, your point is utter bullshit because um, let's discuss about the Romans specifically, since we're making the comparison. Now, the Romans, in the very early period of the monarchical time, they the way they did war was by raiding. Okay, you would do light skirmishes that would be mostly decided by cavalry, and then you would try to loot somebody else's village, like fucking Clash of Clans style. no, yeah, turning back serious, like the main warfare was skirmishes and raiding. Okay, nothing serious. Cavalry was mainly the decisive factor in the skirmishes. Infantry was there just as a plus in a certain sense, and to carry back stuff home. Um, but after Servius Tullius, you would see the introduction of a specific type of warfare, which is mainly the field warfare. You have field battles, and guess from where the Romans took that form of warfare from. Exactly, the Greeks invented the phalanx. The Greeks invented the amazing strategies and tactics and logistics. So of course we're gonna take it from somebody that knows how to do stuff better. But that means that if the Romans became such good warriors and warmongers, it was because the Greeks already were good warriors and warmongers. Okay, so the point doesn't stand. The point just doesn't stand. Um, Furthermore, it is not true that the Romans had no concept of philosophy or what morals. There is a distinction between the two. Greek philosophy was about everything. It was a very generalist philosophy, metaphysics, religion, the things that were on the earthly matters. Even that is a philosophy. Physics. It was called physics, if I remember. Nowadays, with physics, we mean all of that annoying stuff that we make us do in high school, calculating the speed of a bullet. I don't know, stuff like that. Um, Physics at the time was that branch of philosophy regarding everything nature, and yeah, it was very generalist. Meanwhile, Romans, the philosophy was tied to the state. Okay, philosophy was developing and was developed in the sense of morals and ethics, and both of those things, especially morals, because remember, morals is comes from Latin mos, which many of you know was an important thing for the Romans, the mos maiorum specifically, the way of the ancients. of the ancestors. That is what the good morals were to the Romans, and of those good morals were to be good citizens, not good people that were knowledgeable of the world, but good people in the matter of the state. So that is the philosophical thought of the Romans. In the earlier periods, it was advancements of you could say political and nowadays you could say it as political and societal philosophy in a certain sense. Okay. So speeches about how a good citizen should be, treatises on how a good father of the family should be, pater familias. Cato was a big man in this sense for Roman philosophy. Yeah, so it's doesn't of course we all agree, and it cannot be denied that the Greeks had a very much more broad view of philosophy in that sense before the syncretization that happened between the cultures, and mm, the Romans had a more narrow view of it and more down to earth in a certain sense. It was all about the state, but doesn't mean that the Romans did not have their good amount of philosophical thought. uh, So yeah, being a warrior doesn't mean you cannot be a philosopher. Uh, if that was the case, of course, this is a figure that happened much later than the usual period that people bring about. But let's be honest, one of the main critiques that the Roman detractors bring and to foster the Greeks is the Roman Empire. Okay, so I know that in the Roman Empire, technically the Roman and the Greek cultures were still merging and were about to merge, and at one point they just merged, into a unified identity. But alongside with many other local things, the Gallo-Romans, the African Romans, blah 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 blah. Still, I would like to take in consideration the empire as well, because that is a point of discussion in the things. If the if the Romans, sorry, the Greeks, if the Romans are imperialists, usually you think about the Roman Empire. So let's take that in consideration. The Roman Empire is a specific figure, which is Marcus Aurelius. Jim Bros, calm down, please. Do not start. I do not want to see the comments being flooded with Jim Bro comments of Marcus Aurelius. God forbid. Um, Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. He was a commander, a military commander, and he was a well, I don't really want to call Marcus Aurelius a philosopher, but he tried to practice, the Stoic philosophy. I am still not convinced that his diary is a philosophical work. It's just his life. It's just his life, and he in his life is trying to apply Stoic philosophy. Okay. So yeah, if you want, you could count him as a philosopher who was also a warrior and a military commander and an emperor and imperialist. So the things are not meant to be completely separated every single time. So yeah, that was the first argumentation, which, as we saw, is nothing but utter bullshit. So let's pass on to the second one. Greeks are democratic, Romans are not, therefore Greeks better. And oh my god. Aside of the fact that for a good period of time when the Greeks were still, independent from Rome, because remember who won in the end? Um, remember how the Greeks called themselves until the Greek Revolution? Remember that? Nobody talks about that. Huh? Nobody ever talks about that. When bringing up these points, the Greeks remained Greeks up until no. Remember how the Greeks called themselves before the Greek Revolution, and then we can talk about it. Anyway, when the the Greeks were still independent, um, Rome was a republic. It had been a monarchy for like the beginning of its period, but then it was a republic. Okay, it became an empire later on, but we will get to the point on who they based that empire upon. On whose figure they based it upon. We'll see that things are not as black and white as some people put it. Um, there were many ways of governing for the Greeks: the democracy and the monarchy and the oligarchy, and blah blah blah. People that know this, that bring these things usually bring forth Aristotle's, and you have those type of for the aristocracy, not oligarchy, aristocracy, the democracy, and the monarchy. So all of those were legitimate in the eyes of the Greeks, okay, because each Greek city-state or wider entity had their own way of governance if they wanted. And it's not like all of the Greeks were united into one single state, if you don't count, the Empire of Alexander. But let's talk about that as well later on because it's not really black and white there as well. Um, so yeah, like for there were some Greeks who lived under kings, and they were totally legitimate to them. They were totally legitimate kings because there is a difference between a tyrant and a king for them. If you were of noble blood, and by noble blood it means you were a descendant of Heracles, you had every single right to rule over other people. Absolutely, you had every single every single right to do that. The Heracles, I'm not sure how you pronounce it in English, were the only legitimate kings in the Greek world. Not Hellenistic, please. Not let's not confuse Hellenistic and Greek. Uh, so you have the difference between the Basileus and the Tyrannos. Okay, it's very different. The tyrant is the man that takes power without being of noble blood, and usually in a democracy. Okay, Aristotle has a nice way of describing this with the ways that a tyrant comes to be. Either because he was neglected by the rest of the aristocracy, or because he appeals to the people and other stuff. He has a very nice way to describe it. Um, so yeah, that's a distinction. So the Greeks accepted monarchy as long as it was, not a tyranny, but like they had their limitations to monarchy in a certain sense. But that doesn't mean they did not accept it. And let's be honest, Athens is the usual beacon of Greek democracy that is put forth by these people, correct? Correct. It is Athens. Athens in contraposition to Sparta. Athens is the worst example to use if you want to show an anti imperialist and democratic state. Athens thought of its citizenship as higher than those of the other cities when it was in a league. Remember the the league that Athens led. You have to remember that Athens thought of itself as being in a higher position than everybody else. Okay, and the colonies of Athens. The colonies of Athens, like there are different types of Greek colonies. The first, most important, probably one is the apoikia, which is like a colony founded out of necessity of a community, whether because of a religious vow, because of lack of resources, too many people getting bored. You get a point, any reason, and you found this civilian colony which is separate from the original city, and you just throw away people from the city in a certain sense. Apoikia means going away from home, far from home. Um, yeah, that's one type. So the civilian type of colony. The second is the merchant type of colony, which is the emporion. The emporion was founded usually close to already existing cities, if not inside them, as a type of city quarter in a certain sense. And it existed mainly for merchants and their families to be able to reside while they were doing commerce. And finally, the cleruchia. The cleruchia is a military colony akin to the Roman colonies. They were founded in strategic places um, to better control the territory. And these klerukias usually have klerukiai, actually klerukiai, where would take the not only they would control the people around them, but they would have to be sustained by them. Okay, and this is the type of colony that Athens founded the most. I don't think that Athens ever founded neither an emporion nor an apoikia. I'm pretty sure they didn't. If somebody knows about it, tell me in the comments. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But it cannot be denied that the biggest amount of colonies founded by Athens are Klerukiae. Okay, and like Athens is a very imperialistic power. It was a very, very imperialistic power. From thinking itself of superior, then to all this use of the Klerukiae. It always um, parallels with Rome in a certain sense, okay? Um, so yeah, I'm not sure whether bring Athens as the epitome of Greek democracy. I think that the best example maybe for Greek democracy would be like the one of the leagues, and not the Athenian, not the leagues of Athens, the Aetolian League. In the Aetolian League, for example, all of the cities had their own citizenship. Okay, they had their own citizenship, and each citizenship was accepted by each city in the league. So if you were to move from one to the other, you would sorry. If you were to move from one city of the league to another city of the league, you would be treated as an equal citizen, no matter from where you came, as long as you came from the same exact league. Okay. But compared to Athens, Rome is so much more democratic, thanks especially to that system of gradated citizenship. You know, the Latin citizenship, when you become a Roman citizen. For those who don't know, so the Roman citizenship is the best spot to be in Rome. You have all of the rights. You have the right to mainly these are the rights, for a Roman citizen, the most important right to marry another Roman, right to commerce with another Roman, right to move wherever you want in the Roman territory, and the right to be voted or to vote for Roman magistracies. The Latin citizenship pretty much is everything aside the last one, so you cannot be voted or vote for Roman magistracies. And they would give it to people who have been allied for a long time, or that they deserve. It can also be given individually. For example, there are many such instances of allied or subjugated cities in which they elect their officials, and those officials, once elected, they become Latin citizenships. Because sorry, my mind is not here today. Latin citizens, okay. For example, I don't know. Imagine a random city in Apulia that had their own way of governance to elect people, and nothing they elected their own officials. They were allied to Rome. They were in a good position. Good. Those officials now are Latin citizens, and they may hope to become Roman citizens in the future. Um, yeah, the way of propagating the elite and slowly assimilating the rest of the people. Uh, Romans were not foreign to allocating citizenships to everybody that deserved it. Much better than the Greeks, who, if you were not Greek, you don't speak Greek, you're not from a Greek family, and blah 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 blah. You are not a Greek citizens. Go the fuck away from me, barbarian. Pretty much. Insert low tier god meme. mm, but yeah, I don't know why they bring Athens, especially as the beacon. Not even like the rest would be better again. You have the kingdoms, you have the tyrannies, and oh my, let's talk about the Hell, because some people think that the Hellenistic kingdoms can be counted as Greek. There's a big distinction between Hellenistic and Greek. Let's finally talk about it. So, being Greek is, speaking one of the Greek dialects, or speaking Koine Greek, as your mother tongue, coming from a Greek family, having certain values, belonging to a specific territory, even usually. Okay, a lot of things. Being Hellenistic, however, was doing stuff in the way of the Greeks was not being Greek, being Hellenistic. So it's not being Hellene, which means being Greek. It's being Hellenistic. Um, that's why the kingdom, like the how we call it, the so-called Macedonians of not the Macedonians of Macedonia, but the so-called Macedonians of the Middle East. They weren't fully. They were just Hell, Hellenic, Hellenistic. Um, they were not Greeks in themselves. They spoke Greek, sure, okay. They did art in the way of the Greeks, yeah, sure, absolutely. They commerce the way they were, okay, perfect. Were they Greeks? No. The Greeks would have never accepted such a thing to call somebody that was of just doing stuff their way. They would be pleased with it, was like because they were, we are superior, we are absolutely superior. You have to do stuff the way we do it. But are you Greek even if you do this? No, absolutely not. The Romans were much more elastic on this, much more. It was a question of civic rights more than culture. It was also a question of culture, of course. It's that also always takes a spot. However, um, speaking Latin, even broken Latin, and accepting the Roman pantheon was already enough of a thing to. The rest you could dress yourself the way you wanted and do whatever you wanted. Of course, not in public. In public, if you wanted to be, part of the Roman elite, you have to wear the toga, you have to do this. But you were a private citizen. You could do whatever you wanted in your house. It's not a problem. Pray your gods, dress the way you wanted, be whatever you want. Just, you have the civic rights, you speak Latin, it's good. You pay taxes. You pay taxes. Amazing. Perfect. Roman citizen. A perfect example. So yeah, Rome seems much more democratic than many Greek states seem, especially because monarchy was quite big, especially during the Hellenistic period, and became a big factor of the so-called Hellenic world. Um, so yeah, that's another of the points. The last point argument was that. The Greeks had such refined things that the Romans stole everything from them. And usually we're talking about literature. We're talking about. So sorry if you hear something moving. It's my notebook, and I have to. I cannot just make shit up. I need my sources. So yeah, the literature, the art, and the religion and mythology. Let's start with the literature because it's the only point that I can kind of agree. The Romans were envious, and the Romans absolutely adored the Greek way of writing. However, that doesn't mean that they did not have one of their own. They absolutely had, but it was replaced. Uh, One of the main things that you can recognize it for something being Latin before the Greeks, Italic actually. Even though Italic is a bit of a term that I don't really like usually. There's this thing called italic alliteration, which is a funny way of writing verses in which you would put the same letter, like a word, many words that make sense together in a sentence, but have a specific letter repeated many, many times. That was like one of the characteristics of Latin literature before they decided to, start looking at the Greek classics. And it all started when they translated like the main two two words, the Odyssey, if I remember first, and then the Iliad. They translated it from Greek to Latin through I don't remember his name. I think it was a Greek. It should have been like a Greek slave that went became part of a Latin family and translated it, being the cultured man he was, Greek culture, the bridge in the multiverse. So yeah, I can agree with that because the Romans later on, even during the Augustine regime, they looked at the classics and they were posing themselves a question: okay, should we continue copying the classics and the Greek classics, or should we actually try to syncretize with them. Like they did not have a conception later of doing something of their own. Like the most they could think was these two school of thoughts. The first, we continue copying what the Greeks do and we just do it in Latin, okay? Or simply we try to make something new, but we use as the basis, we still use the Greeks. So yes, I can absolutely agree that at least regarding literature, the Romans fought and thought that the Greeks were more sophisticated, and in this case, the Greeks were more sophisticated in poetry, in historiography, literature in general. So yeah, point accorded. You won. You won for this time, Roman detractors, but not for long because the next point is about art. Okay, the problem with here is again the Hellenistic against Greek, because what the Romans really copied is Hellenistic art, which is not like it was absolutely accepted in the Greek world. There is a distinction. The the Hellenistic world likes to portray. I'm talking mainly here about sculptures, okay, so statues. Because if you talk of temples, like there are many similarities, but that is because the Mediterranean people usually from Italy and Greece and Anatolia had similar temples in general. They had their differences, of course, but they are so negligible that we can skip over there and say that there it's not even a question of copying, but it's simply a question of having a common architecture all over the place. But regarding sculptures, which is one of the things that they mainly bring on, um, Hellenistic statues have this thing about portraying humans in a humane way, or even deities in a humane way. Okay, no, not humane, human. Sorry, showing emotions, showing strength, showing weakness. So the entire human psyche can be represented. For the Greeks, it was a little bit different. Before the Hellenistic period, it was absolutely not accepted to represent anything aside in statues that looked anthropomorph, anything besides deities. The only exceptions is the statues to the Tyrannicids that killed the Pisistrates in Athens. Okay, of course, Athens, as always, has to be the great beacon of antithetic Greek world. Um, so yeah, that is the only one of the. There is another thing, but that is after the Hellenistic period, like during the Hellenistic period. It is the only recorded thing that I can think of a very important sculpture being done to a human being without them being how do you say that elevated to gods, not divinized. They, whether they went through the process of deification. um, and the Tyrannicids, yes, they were a symbol of Athens, so I'm not surprised that they did that in a certain sense. Um, it's probably even acceptable in the eyes of the other Greeks to see that okay, they protected the democracy which is sacred in Athens, so okay, let's make a statue to them. But it was abhorred to have a cult of the living and having statues for people that recently passed away. Um, However, of course, Athens has to become even more anti-Greek because during the Hellenistic period there was like this dude Dionysius, I think it was called. I'll check. And pretty much this guy was so important to the Athenians at one point that not only we made statues of him, we treated him as as a literal god on earth. So yeah, but whatever. Athens is a specific, very specific place, let's say. Mm, Regardless of that, yes, the Romans copied mainly the Hellenistic art in regarding sculptures. So again, it doesn't stand because if you count the Hellenistics as being Greek, then you have to renounce to the claim of the democracy, which already was not really well accepted due to all of the monarchies, the oligarchies, and everything that the Greek world had. If you count the Hellenistic world as being Greek, to make the point of, oh, the Romans copied Greek art, then you have to accept that the Hellenistic world was like the Hellenistic kingdoms were, first of all, well, kingdoms, monarchies, with imperialist ends. So yeah, either one or the other. You cannot really choose one. No, no. Okay, okay. I found it. He was not called Dionysus. He was called Demetrius. Demetrius. That's the guy. Okay, and that was for art. Lastly, the religion. The religion. Oh my god, I left this for last because it's the thing that makes me infuriate the most when they say Roman religion and Roman mythology is nothing else but Greek stuff revamped and copied, you know? No, it's not. Roman religion has a very rich history of evolution. I mean, it started completely different to how it ended, especially because it ended in Christianity. But so it's not even compare the beginning to the end. How Roman religion started was an almost animistic cult of objects. Mars was a spear that would vibrate depending on his will. Jupiter was a flint. I think the word is flint. Because the Romans thought that the flint was a solidified and petrified thunderbolt. Okay, so you can see the connection. Um, so they would consult Jupiter for consulting this specific flint, and so on and so forth with every single deity. Okay, so this is how Roman religion started. It was not anthropomorphized. Then, when the Etruscans came to rule over Rome, they imported their anthropomorphized deities, and the Romans got a taste of that and continued doing so. It also changed how the main three deities were seen, but let's talk to it about in a second. Let's first discuss about the prerogatives of such of these deities, because people usually say, "Oh, but Mars is just Aries, Jupiter is just Zeus." No, Zeus made the people that do anthropological studies and study mythology forgive me. Not because I'm gonna say anything wrong. I am never wrong. I'm just joking. No, it's because I'm going to do a big oversimplification here because the discourse would be much more broad and already this video is getting too long for it. So yeah, let's oversimplify it. That religiously each deity represents a characteristics of society, a stereotype of a person, and so on and so forth. Zeus is supposed to be the king, the Basileus. Okay, not the Basileus in the like the style of the contemporary Greek king, but how the Greek king was viewed like post post the Mycenaean collapse. Okay, in which the Basileus, before becoming fully fledged monarchical figure, the Basileus was a local figure, and this local figure would do whatever the fuck it wanted to do. Okay, and you can see the connection with Zeus, like the leader, the self-proclaimed leader, pretty much, who rules with force, and whenever it wants something, it gets something, regardless of what others want. That is what the Basileus was like at the beginning of the when the Greek culture was still being and society was still being developed after the Mycenaean collapse. Um, then you would have Jupiter, which was part of the thing that I wanted to talk before, the archaic triad of Rome. Okay, and this archaic triad is a group of three gods: Jupiter, Mars, and Quirinus. Each of them served a purpose, societally speaking. you could describe it as the division of power of the Indo-European cultures. Jupiter is there to symbolize judicial power, Quirinus is there to symbolize legislative powers, and Mars executive power. As you know, yes, Quirinus was also known as the divinized and deificated, whatever, god Romulus, so the one that gave Rome the law. Jupiter is, the highest of the deities, so it's the one that has to judge. And Mars is the god of war, correct? No, that's why he has executive power. Absolutely not. The god Mars was deity of conflict but in the sense of protection. If you look at every Roman conflict, you will see that they try to justify every war as a war of defense and the protection. That's why Mars is invoked mainly, because if you read in Cato, passage of Cato the Elder, you will see how he talks that in order to pray for your fields, that your fields go well, and for the protection, you have to pray to Mars and offer sacrifices to Mars. Meaning that in actuality, Mars was the deity that, yes, protected the fields, and so if you come at war with somebody, that somebody and you think that it's a war of defense, it means that you see this invader as somebody there that came there to steal your fields and take it away from you. So who will you invoke? Of course, you will invoke Mars in this case. Which is not the same as Aries, because Aries is the symbolization of war as like the step after violence. Okay, because war can be put into two different categories: the conflict in itself and the strategy, the tactics, the logistics, everything behind the human part of war. In a certain sense, the human part of war is exemplified by one of, among many things, um, by Athena. And the basic part of war, the violence itself, is symbolized by Mars. Because violence, it can be done by anybody, can be done by animals as well, but logistic strategies has to be done by somebody wise, so you have to take Athena in that sense. Um, if you want to see a parallel to Ares, you should go and look at Bellona, which was the Roman deity of war. No, totally. She was also known as Duellona, so you can already see the connection. Dueling, Bellona, then Bellum, meaning war. Whenever a war broke out, the Romans would also uh, do a ritual in the temple of Bellona to properly declare war, otherwise the war was not legitimate. So yeah, and then eventually, like the Romans were good at something specific. It was the taking local deities, local deities, and putting them into the pantheon. It was easy. You start a war. You go to sieging a city. There is a city protected by insert deity. You do a ritual called evocatio or evocatio, in which you ask the deity to abandon their people and come to Rome, where it will receive a shrine, a temple. And their people, when conquered, will still be able to pray to that deity. And how do they do that? They Latinize the concept of the deity. For example, with Carthage, how did it work? They had a female deity, which I don't remember who it was. You will forgive me. And they Latinized it into Juno, and they added an epithet to symbolize it. It was Juno something something. Then you had, for example, another one of those Canaanite deities, which was a male in this case, and they simply called it Jupiter Africanus, so the African Jupiter, and like that, you assimilate everything to your deities. Um, making the people that you conquer, more easily um, I don't know, ruled over, because religion was a very important matter in the ancient world, more than some people would like to give it credit for. So yes, they pretty much managed to convert people to their culture by by simply saying, yeah, it's the same. It's simply that we speak Latin, so we're just gonna call it Jupiter Africanus, not whatever the fuck the guy was called. Um, some probably Canaanite Baal bullshit or whatever. Um, and the problem with the Greeks comes when we have to syncretize the Greeks. How do we do? How do we do? We try to do with the same method. Oh, but they also have a huge mythology behind it and in a literary corpus. Well, fuck. What do we do now? We like to copy the Greeks' literary corpus. Ovidius happens. That's what happens. Okay, blame Ovidius. Ovidius simply makes the. I mean, not only they also have Apuleius and you have other authors as well, but due to them, the the Roman mythology and the Greek mythology became one. They pretty made a national, supranational mythology in which um, now those were the canonic deities. Whether you were African, whether you're Roman, Latin, whether you're Greek, you were whatever. Those were the deities that you were praying to, pretty much in a certain sense. So blame them. Blame the poets. Always blame the poets. Poor poets. Yeah, that's the last point gone. And if you have other I want to hear in the comments if you guys have ever heard this claim of the Greeks being better than the Romans because XYZ, and if they said something that I did not cover. Because if I think I will then cover it in in the next rant maybe, who knows. But yeah, that's about it for this video.